Thanks, Tony. I think, I'm 85 years old, be 86 this summer. So I've been at this a long time. But I think that the important thing is to realize how I got involved. I mean, I was born into a Christian family. I went to a Christian day school. I went to a Christian college in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Calvin College, then got out into the world and, medicine sort of takes uh, someone once described to me, it's like a mistress. The more involved you get, the more time it takes. And I was very successful. Had a great reputation, was being referred all the tough cases in our area, and I thought I was doing pretty well. But there's a principle that became very obvious to me, and that is if you're going to be used by God, He needs to break you. And I'm going to tell three stories tonight that sort of illustrate that. But my story is that uh, I was just bopping along doing very well in 1995, 96, and then all of a sudden I lost it. I became very depressed, almost suicidal at one point, trying to figure out what does my life mean? There's a very interesting book by a guy named Bob Buford called Halftime that I read during that period of time. And Bob's a Christian. He was a TV magnate in the Midwest. Anyway, and the principle of the book is you go through two halves of your life. First, you become very successful. And then you sit down and if you're a Christian, you try and figure out, well, what did all this mean? And that's halftime. And then in the second half of your life, you do something that's significant. So you move from success to significance. And that happened to me, as I said, in late 1996, 97. I was in this period of depression where I couldn't go to the hospital. I couldn't do anything medical. Like, the only thing I could do was sit and read the Bible, spend some time with my family, and pray. But eventually God led me out of that. But through all of that, I said to myself, well, I've trained, I'm a doctor. What did I do? And it became obvious that, God gave me medicine for a reason. So I said, well, I need to get involved in medical medicine, medical missions. And then met a man who asked me to come to Macedonia, and this was in 1998. And I went over there, and I thought I had a contract with the Minister of Health to teach four young men how to do cardiac surgery. But the war in Kosovo occurred, and the government in Macedonia changed, and it all went south. And then I went to India. I went to Wanless Hospital in Miraj, India. And what I found out that they were pretty bright people, as all of you from India know. They didn't need my brains or my hands. They needed money, and that wasn't what I had to offer. But then in late 1999, Dr. Sheehan and I, who had become very good friends, got this request to come and see what's going on in Macedonia. I mean, in Cambodia. So we went for the first time in June of 2000, and we were taken there by two men. One of them was a Cambodian, and the other was a Christian businessman from the United States. Just for a quick review, you can see these pictures, right?
Yes.
Just to refresh your memory, this is Cambodia. Main city is Phnom Penh, which is where all of our ministry has been focused, although a lot of patients come from out in these peripheral areas out in the rice farms. Phnom Penh being the primary city, Battambang the second largest city. Of course, the most famous part is Siem Reap, where the Angkor Wat temples are. But that's the country of Cambodia. But let's just review for a minute a little Cambodian history. From 1960 or 1863 to 1953, it was a French colony. French controlled most of Southeast Asia, Vietnam, etc. But the French began to object, and finally in 1953, the French sort of said, okay, we'll make King Prince Sihanouk, who was only about 19 years old at that point, we'll make him the king. And between 53 and 70, he sort of ran the country. He was initially the king, then he became prime minister because he wanted to have a political title. 1970, he went to China, and while he was gone, his chief um, military man, Lon Nol, with the help of the United States, took over. Lon Nol was very um, pro-West, pro the United States, and so the United States set him up as the leader of the country, and he did this between 1970 and 1975. But during that period of time, the communists, which is what essentially what Sihanouk was, also began to object violently, and they began to come in under the leadership of Pol Pot to take over the country. And what they did was they empowered all the rice farmers, the poor kids, young people, gave them guns, told them they had to get rid of all these intelligent people, and they were going to run the country as a communist country. And so on April 17th of 1975, they finally took over Phnom Penh and they ran the country for 3 years and 10 months till January 10th of 79. Some of the atrocities of the Khmer Rouge were listed on these three slides. But the main thing was they were wanted to make Cambodia into a classless agrarian utopia where everyone was a rice farmer. They were going to increase the uh, the production of rice by a factor of at least three, and they were going to, it was going to be a barter system. They eliminated all the monetary. They got rid of anybody who had any brains. They thought if you had glasses, you were considered an intellectual, and they killed you. So, as it says, they killed nearly 2 million people during that period. One of the most fascinating parts of it is how they documented this. On the left, I think, did you guys go to Tuol Sleng?
I don't think we did. We went to the killing.
This was a high school, and they made it into a torture chamber behind these things. On the right is the Killing Field Museum, which is where thousands of people were killed. This is one of the pictures from Tuol Sleng, where they're taking someone who they thought was not buying into their regime. It is estimated that during this period that only 45 doctors survived the reign, and most of them left. So when it was over with, there were only 20 left. And by 1989, there were only 10. And it was these 10 that then we're going to have to rebuild the medical system. Well, what happened between 79 and 89 was that after the Viet Cong were sort of leading all of this with the help of some ex-Khmer Rouge generals, namely Hun Sen and Che Sim. They pushed the Khmer Rouge up into the northeast corner, but there continued to be fighting for that whole 10-year period. So it was just a period of civil war. Well, the United Nations got involved in early 1990s, and they monitored the first democratic elections in 1993. The government was set up. They'd have elections every 5 years. But there's one party, the CPP, the Cambodian People's Party, that has won every time. And Hun Sen has been the prime minister. Well, let's talk a little bit about the ministries. So, as I said, in June of 2000, Dr. Sheehan and I went over there at the request of Mr. Jim Groon and Reverend Seton Lee. Here's a picture of Seton. Now, Seton is fascinating in that in April of 1975, he was just finishing his first year of medical school. He says, told me that, they were having parties and everything was going great. And then all of a sudden the Khmer Rouge, and he was taken out into the fields to become a rice farmer, like everyone else. And he lived that way for the whole period of time. One day, they found out that he was had been in medical school, and they were going to kill him. And they had him down, and they were about to bludgeon him over the back of the head. And he cried out, "God of the universe, if you save me, I will serve you forever." Now, Seton had no idea who the God of the universe was. I mean, he was Buddhist, but somehow he cried. And as he was crying out, someone came and said, "Well, don't kill him. He may be pretty smart. Maybe he can help us figure out how to increase the rice production." Well, Seton said, "I didn't know much about it, but when your back's to the wall, you'll do everything you can." So that's what he did for the rest of his time with the Khmer Rouge. Well, when the Khmer Rouge were defeated, he managed to get up into Thailand, by climbing across dead bodies to avoid the landmines, and he got into the uh, Cow Dung One refugee camp in Thailand, and there he met some Christian people and found out who the God of the universe really was. And then he and his family were brought. That's his wife Rhonda, who we met there in the Thailand um, refugee camp. Anyway, they were brought to Denver by a Faith Presbyterian Church here in Denver. And there he, while working as a janitor for the church, he also got his degree at Colorado Christian University, and then went to Denver Seminary and became a Presbyterian pastor. The principle that I'm dwelling on is because here again, God took someone who thought he was doing okay, broke him, and brought him into his field, and now he's going back to become a missionary to Cambodia. And Seton is still very involved with Ian Rhonda. They have multiple ministries, including an orphanage up in the Northeast. They've got a training center to bring women out of prostitution. They feed kids downtown. But God broke this young man, and he was the one that led Mark and I, mainly the one that brought us to Cambodia. This does look what Phnom Penh looked like in 2000 when I first went there. I mean, you can see there are very many mopeds on the street. This on the left is a typical, almost like a 7-Eleven, where you drive up and you get a bottle. It looks like a Coke bottle, but it's filled with gasoline. You put it into your little moped and off you go. Or you can buy something to eat or drink. On the right was a typical along the street uh, restaurant. I saw so much of this early on, people on their mopeds with this. In fact, I've seen as many as 7 people of a family, mother, father, and 7 kids draped on one of these things. This was the first hospital that we started to work at. It's called Praket Malaya. Um, if you look at it, when I first looked at this, it looked like a rundown Motel 6. Um, And on the left, there's a lot of trash, people living out with their laundry out there. I don't know if you can see underneath what I say the pictures. There's a lady and then a man is standing next. And the lady is named Marie Enns, and she met Mark and I on Pentecost Sunday when we were going to go to church. And she says, "Come with me. You won't get much out of the sermon because it's not going to be in English, but I'm going to show you something." So she brought us to this hospital, showed us around. This is a typical floor. Families live out on the runway of this hotel, patients back in the room. They're cooking, they do all the cleaning, take care of the patient. What we found were that doctors were there, doctors and sometimes nurses, until noon, and then they all ran off to their private clinics. So the family was the only one that was around to take care of them in the afternoon and the evening. Here's a picture of someone taking a bath. Very typical family laying on a mat with a patient in the bed next to them. Family's the ones taking care of them. This picture has always fascinated me because the only analgesic people got when we first saw him was ice put on their incisions. They thought that if they could anesthetize the skin, that would be it. So no one got any narcotics. All they got was ice on there. The second person is Dr. Kaler. Now, Dr. Kaler is a person we met on our first trip. On the last day, on that Pentecost Sunday, this Marie Ann's introduced us to Kendrick. Kendrick his history is that he was a West Point graduate, and one of the things he did is ran the half mile. Well, he went after he got from West Point, he went to North Africa and he was driving a Jeep. The Jeep blew a tire. He was thrown out and he became paraplegic. Through that, while he was laying under the Jeep, he tells me he heard the Hallelujah chorus. And he made the commitment that he was going to do something for the Lord if he made it through all this. So after going through rehab, he went to medical school, did a family practice residency in Texas, and then went to Thailand to become a medical missionary. Well, in Thailand, he found out they didn't need his medical care there. They probably needed the gospel. But so he went next door into Phnom Penh, and with the help of Second Baptist Church of Houston, they rented this building. You can see with the paint, and was making it into a medical clinic. And he was just starting this when we met him. So that's Pentecost Sunday. We spent some time talking and praying with him and made the decision that we were going to support him by bringing teams to help take care of some of the complicated problems he gets. This is a picture of the waiting room in that clinic. And these people would come in and would sit there for 2 and 3 days waiting for us to get there. They'd come from the provinces. It just always amazed me how patient they were. So the Christian Medical Ministry to Cambodia, Jeremiah's Hope. And Jeremiah's Hope, it comes from Jeremiah 29:11, where through the prophet Jeremiah, God was saying to the people of Israel, "I know the plans I have for you, not to harm you, but to prosper you, to give you a hope and a future." And that's what we felt we were doing for the people of Cambodia. So that's part of our moniker. So it's a non-denominational international Christian ministry dedicated to providing excellent medical care to the poor and quality medical education to the community of Cambodia. Our vision was short-term, to do short-term medical mission trips to give care to the poor, teach young Cambodian professionals, and evangelize. Part of that, we were going to bring patients with special needs to the United States, which at this point we've done that 4 times. Bring Cambodian physicians and nurses to the United States for short-term medical training, and bring medical equipment and supplies to Cambodia. Here's the first team in November of 2000. Well, Mark and I were there again in June, and then we brought our first team back in November. There's a much bigger team now in 2023. One of the fascinating things we saw, in addition to the cardiac problems, were these huge thyroid goiters. Everyone in Cambodia was just taking rock salt instead of iodized salt because it was cheaper. So you saw a lot of big necks. And this is Dr. Steve Kim, who's going to take care of that for us. This is a neurosurgeon, Dr. Gary Vander Ark, who's doing some brain surgery. This is the first patient we brought to the United States back in 2001. This little girl's name was Ganya Soon. She was head of ventricular septal defect, which got infected. Her tricuspid valve secondarily got infected. And Dr. Kaler put this girl and her mother on an airplane in Phnom Penh to come to the United States. How she made it is, again, one of God's provinces because neither of them spoke any English, but they managed to make it through a couple of hospital airplane transfers. And there we are, Dr. Sheehan and a Cambodian pastor who I knew very well, helped with translations. We fixed the VSD and repaired her tricuspid valve, and here she is in 2007. One of the doctors we brought here to the United States, she's a pediatric physician. She, when we talked to her in Cambodia, she always said, "No, I'm a Buddhist. I'm a Buddhist." But then after she came to the United States, one day she came up to Mark and she said to him, she says, "Mark, I need to confess." And Mark said, "What do you mean confess? What did you do wrong?" And he said, "No, what she really wanted to do was to make profession of faith, to become a Christian." And so here she's being baptized by this same Cambodian pastor while she was there. And I continue to see Moni every time I go back. It's a wonderful young lady. There's an organization called Project Cure, which was started in 1987 by a man in Denver who saw a need for medical equipment in foreign countries, and he started this business accumulating it. As you all know, doctors and hospitals can be very wasteful. And they now presently have huge warehouses in Denver, Houston, Phoenix, Nashville, and Chicago. They maybe have them somewhere else also. But this is where we get all our medical equipment. We've sent over 9 40-foot containers of medical equipment to Cambodia. Plus the fact every time we go, we each take one piece of personal luggage and one piece of luggage with soft good and medical equipment. And we get it all from this organization called Project Cure. In 2008, we lost focus. Kendrick got ill with his paraplegia. He was developing some urinary tract problems, and he had to go back to the United States. We lost our leadership. At the same time, the Chinese took over the clinic. So we were sort of struggling for a couple of years. We tried to use a couple of public hospitals that we'd gotten to know some people, but it turned out to be a disaster. We had flies and cats running around the operating room, and when we had some emergencies, we could never get things mobilized. But in God's providence, He brought me to meet with these people from Sihanouk Hospital, Center of Hope. And they also had a Christian orientation. And so we partnered with them to build this. And this is what you guys saw when you were there. This is the clinic building with Hope Worldwide and, whoops. And our insignia here. Whoops. Anyway, so we remodeled this. Now, I'm not sure I told you this, but this building was a combination of brothel and gambling house. And the government was trying to shut down the business. And so the three owners of it were looking for someone to take it over. And so with Hope Worldwide, we rented it from them and we remodeled it. We took 2 floors, they took 3. And that's from 2010 until presently. That's where we've worked. Here's a picture of the operating room, and now all this equipment, including the lights, operating table, Bovie units, all this all came from Project Cure. We shipped over on containers. These are the principal physicians that we've dealt with. I met Sochin, the man on the left, as my interpreter back in 2000 when I first went there. And Sochin, through our influence and the Pastor Kim, when he was here in Denver, became a Christian. Whoops, I keep accidentally pushing that. He also has a Christian wife, his wife Tola. And the man on the right is a cardiac surgeon who I mentored for 15 years all over there. So Sochin is a neurosurgeon, his wife is a neurologist, and Tisa Peep is the cardiac surgeon. This little boy now just went to Auckland, not Auckland, to Melbourne, Australia to start medical school. This is our medical staff that we have now. We have 25 nurses. We've got actually 4 physicians. We've just a young internist just joined the group. A couple of administrative people, but that was the conference room I think you guys sat in when you were there. In terms of cardiac care, when Mark and I were first there, the French were building a heart center, and we got invited to help participate. We started bringing cardiac teams in 2007, and every year, either in January or February, we still send a cardiac team, and we'll see somewhere around 100 patients a year. We schedule 30 to 40 heart operations, which cost us $100,000, which we've got to raise every year. And then in 2014, we started having a yearly cardiac conference with the team was there. This is the heart center that was built in 2001. It's actually being replaced now. The French are now building an even bigger place behind it, but that's where we worked for the. So what have we accomplished in 19 years? And I say 19 years because I made this in 2020 when, because of COVID, everything shut down. We had a team go in February of 2020, and then no one was able to go until 22. So during that period of time, we had brought 64 teams with about 750 members and saw over 3,500 patients. We did 1,250 surgical procedures, of which 350 were open heart. We did teaching in Cambodia. We brought 6 physicians to Denver. We brought 5 nurses to the Philippines, or paid for them to go to the Philippines and get their BSN degree, because the only nursing training you get, it was a sort of a LPN type nurses. And then we got 3 nurses. We managed to get to Sacramento for 3 months of training with one of our nurses. One of the hardest parts of all of this is to get them here was always fighting with the U.S. government, the embassy, to get them visas to come. But God's providence, we were able to get some of them over, not all that we wanted. We have 10 staff people who have made a commitment for the Lord through our work. We brought 4 patients to Denver. We brought $25 million worth of equipment was given. At this, when we say 17,000 patients, those were seen by our local staff, not expatriate teams. I showed you a picture earlier of what Phnom Penh looked like in 2000. This is what it looks like in 2022, and it's an unbelievable difference in the city. I mean, there were none of these high rises, none of these big cranes, none of that was there in 2000. Just amazing how the city has grown in the 25 years that I've been going there. In 2022, we made the decision that we had to move. And the reason, multiple reasons. One is that rent was increasing. They were increasing our rent 20% every 2 years. And that was becoming untenable. In that clinic, we really didn't have a lot of identity. I mean, it was the first and second floor were controlled by these other people, that other group, and patients had a hard time finding us. The location was not optimal in central Phnom Penh. We didn't have any room to grow. And one of the things that I learned very early on about medical missions, if you're going to do something like this, it eventually has to become somewhat self-sustaining. You cannot expect to pay for it forever. So, although we started out taking care of only poor patients, and we still take care of a lot of very poor patients, as our care, quality of care became known around the city, there were some people who would pay, non-indigent patients, but they didn't like the facility. Wasn't sort of up to snuff. So we made the decision that we were going to try and build our own hospital. So we purchased a piece of property. And when I was there in February 9th of 2024, we had groundbreaking for our new facility. And here I am with Sochin and Tola and a lot of the staff. We had a little groundbreaking ceremony. This is the on the left, upper left is the architect's rendering of what it potentially will look like when it's all done. Be 4 floors. First floor has a radiology, a small ER. Second floor is clinic space. Third floor is administrative. Fourth floor is the operating room, ICU. Fifth floor is regular hospital beds. Again, on the bottom right is just sort of a rendition of what the lobby would look like. When I was there last in 2025, this is what it looked like under construction. If you go to our website, which I'll show you in a minute, you'll see some more updated pictures of because almost all the walls are up now. One of the fascinating things, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, walls aren't built over there with studs and drywall. They're built with brick and then plastered over the brick because drywall doesn't do well in humid climates. For my last slide, this is just our name. Our website is now www.jhcambodia.org, and you can get more information if you want to go there. And our mailing address is on the bottom.